Welcome back to Russell's Movie Reviews, and welcome back to the first annual Halloween special. And like I said in the Frankenstein review, today we're going to be continuing on with the Frankenstein series, and I'm going to be talking about Bride of Frankenstein, released on April 22nd of 1935, with a budget of $393,750, and domestically it made $2 million, and worldwide has not been confirmed. And it was directed again by James Wales. Um, and for me personally, I think this is slightly better than the first film. Not a significant improvement, but I just think that there are some points that they did better in this film than they did in the previous film. Um, but anyway, let's talk about that plot. But really quickly, I just want to mention that again, 1935, the budgets were very low, and yet 2 million, even though it's a significant step down in terms of box office records compared to the first film where it made 12 million domestically. 2 million is still a lot when you only have pretty much 3,000 like $390,000. Um, that's a lot of money, which so that made this film still a success, not as profitable as the first film, but still a great success. But anyway, let's talk about the plot. So after recovering from injuries sustained by the mob attack upon himself and his creation, Dr. Frankenstein, played by again Colin Clive, falls under the control of his former mentor, Dr. Pretorius, played by Ernest Thesiger, who insists on the now Chinese doctor to resume his experiments in creating new life. Meanwhile, the monster, played by again Boris Karloff, remains on the run from those who wish to destroy him without understanding that his intentions, while generally good, are generally good despite his lack of socialization and self-control. Um so yeah. This film is obviously basically a straight follow-up to the first film. Um um and it's just the only thing that's really kind of unfortunate is that the actress that plays Elizabeth is not the same actress who played her in the first film. While in the first film it was Mae Clark, this film it was Valerie Hobson. Um, and which one do I think is better? Um, that's kind of a hard decision, but I'll get to that later. Um, but yeah, I just think this film actually, this film takes a lot more central plot points from the book than the original film, with the monster on the run and you know Dr. Frankenstein making a bride for the monster. Um, but really, let's talk about the cast really quick. We obviously have Colin Clive returning as Dr. Frankenstein. Um, and I think he does as good of a performance as he did in the first film. Maybe actually a little bit better, because actually, well, at least in the last film, he was, um, he started off as a little bit of a douche, but over time became more sympathetic. Like, at least in the first film, he had an arc where he goes from a scientist douchebag to someone that you actually want to root for by the end of the film. By this film, you're already like feel bad for him because like granted he literally like could barely move. From his injuries from the first film. Um, but yeah, I just think that um Frankenstein in this film is a little bit better than in the um in the previous film. We obviously, like I said before, we have Valerie Hobson replacing Mae Clark as Elizabeth. Now, I honestly think that Valerie Hobson is a little bit better than May Clark from the original. Slightly better, like 0.5% better than May Clark from the original. Um, which granted, it isn't that big of a step of how good it is. It's but at least it's still better. Um, we have Ernest Thesiger as Dr. Pretorius, who was a professor from the university before Frankenstein left, and obviously started his little project on the monster. And he's the one that kind of tries to talk Frankenstein into doing another monster, or trying to make another creation from uh, body parts. But he says, why not make a female one? And um, obviously, Frankenstein and throughout most of the film, it just says, no, I ain't doing it. Um, but I think into the last like 20 minutes or 30 minutes of the movie, um, Frankenstein finally says yes, and he goes and makes the bride. Or in the credits, it's called the monster's mate. Um, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. Um, I think he does okay. He just seems like Frankenstein from the original. Like when you first see him for like the first like 20 minutes, when he's like trying to create the monster, he just seems kind of like a douche. But the thing with Pretorius is that he's just a straight up douche throughout the rest of the film, which I guess kind of makes you want to root for Frankenstein even more because you're like, okay, this guy's a douche. Don't listen to him, Frankenstein, and just go. Um, and obviously we have Boris Karloff returning as the monster, which you could see right there on this cover. Um, and he does great. And this, I think, one of my favorite scenes. Well, actually, I'll get to my favorite scenes in a bit. But I guess spoilers for right here, since I'm gonna be mentioning it first here. But I'll talk more into depth about it when I get to my favorite scenes. Is the scene when he's running through the woods and he's been shot multiple times. Um, he comes to this old man's house, and the old man teaches him how to talk. Um, but like I said, I'll go more into depth about that later. We have Elsa Lanchester as not only Mary Shelley from the opening, talking about um, the story of Frankenstein, but also kind of continues the story. Um, but she also plays the monster's mate or the bride. Um, which for some reason she isn't credited in the whole movie. Sorry for the yawning. But she isn't credited as the bride in none of the credits, not even at the end credits. Because in the first film, if you may remember, Boris Karloff wasn't credited as the monster in the opening credits, but in the end credits, he is mentioned as the monster. Um, but in this film, she is never mentioned as the bride. Um, which is weird, but alright then. Obviously, we have internet now, so we obviously know that Elsa Lanchester plays both Mary Shelley and the bride. Um, as Mary Shelley, she does fine. Really, she only appears in like one or two scenes, and then really that's it. Like at the beginning and the end. Um, but as the bride, she really only appears in like the last like 10 minutes. And um, I just think um that she doesn't really get enough screen time, and I guess might as well mention it now. That in the later sequels, the bride is never mentioned, and yet the monster is the most recurring character out of all the Frankenstein movies. Um, we have Dwight Frye returning as Carl, not as Fritz from the first film, because if you guys may actually, I didn't say this in the first film in the review for the first film, but he actually dies as Fritz in the first film. Um, because he's torturing the monster in the cell, and then um, you don't see what happens, but like the initial like what happened to him, but like when you go into the room, you see that he's been hanged. Um, but and then in this film he's Carl, which is um I think he was a made up character from for the purpose of this film to at least have another assistant. Um and the funny thing is that he's Carl is also killed off, where he's killed by the monster. So and his name is Carl, and the actor playing the monster is Boris Karloff. So think about it. Karloff throws Carl off. Isn't that kind of weird? Um, and finally we have Una O'Connor as Mina, who is basically this. Don't don't mind me using my foul language, but she's a screaming bitch. Who was annoying as hell. Like I think, oh, like she appears in the movie throughout the movie way too much. Like just watch a scene, like watch the opening scene when the monster comes out of the well, or like the windmill, like the basement, like where the water is. After he kills those first two people, that scene alone should tell you why I find her so annoying. But I think you could easily look it up, or more yet, just buy the movie and you'll see what the hell I'm talking about. She also appeared in another James Whale movie called The Invisible Man, which is also a Universal monster. And she was a screamy bitch in that as well. So really, I don't know what the hell she did after the Universal monster movies. I really hope she did not become a screaming bitch in later movies, cause it's annoying. Um, and yeah, that's really all I gotta say about the cast. Uh, huh. It's like kind of early in the morning. It's like 10, so like it's that's why I'm yawning a lot. But anyway, so like I said earlier, my one of my favorite scenes, which I really want to talk about, is when Frankenstein, or the monster, I should say, learns to speak. Um, and I just think that you know, the fact of I think they established more on what I believe that the scene is also in the novel that the monster encounters an old man who is blind, and the blind man teaches the monster how to speak, like like food, good, like fire, no good or something like that, and like he just wants to have a friend. Which kind of leads him to Dr. Pretorius, and then it leads to him trying to convince Frankenstein again that like he like do the monster, and when Frankenstein refuses, he reveals the monster, and then Frankenstein is obviously shocked that like the monster could speak, and yet Pretorius says, um, there have been some developments when he came to me, which is basically implying the fact of that um that he was the one who taught the monster to speak, which is a lie, but it's basically saying, I have more control over your monster now, bitch. Um, but yeah, um, yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes is the old man, the old blind man, and then the monster just chilling in the cabin and just doing stuff. Um, like the old man teaches him about like bread, like you eat bread, and like you drink wine, and then you smoke a cigarette. Um, and this is actually one of the scenes that was parodied in the Mel Brooks parody Young Frankenstein, which I actually will be covering in a future episode of the monster of like the annual Halloween special, because I do have the movie in my collection. It's just I didn't want to do it for this um for the first one, because I thought let's get the more important Halloween movies out of the way, and then we'll discuss that in like maybe the second or third year. Um, but yeah. Um, really quickly to go in, until I go into my fun facts and the rest of the points I need to mention. I want to talk about the Steelbook release, which, like I did with the first film, this was a Best Buy exclusive. Um, so yeah. Um, so obviously this thing comes off, and it's basically just plastic. Um, and the Steelbook is so smooth. Um, fantastic cover art by again Alex Ross, who did the first film. It obviously shows the end scene, and obviously there's the title on the back, and then there's a disc, and then take the disc out, and then show you the inside art. Um, yeah. So really quickly, Una O'Connor was not only in The Bride of Frankenstein, but she was also in The Invisible Man, which is ironically they're both right next to each other on this little pamphlet, which is also the digital code. But I mean, I could show it off because I already scanned the movie. Um, so yeah, both of these were released in 2017, along with all the other Universal monster movies. So yeah. Um, so now I want to talk about the fun fact that I have for this movie. Is that the reason you guys may have noticed that, or if you guys ever watched the movie before, you may notice that most of Harry Frankenstein's scenes involve him sitting down most of the time, like either in the chair or in the bed, kind of recovering from obviously the injuries from the first film. Now, and that was because right before filming began on The Bride of Frankenstein, Colin Clive actually got into a horse accident or a horse riding accident, and he broke his leg right before filming. So, but that's why most of the scenes in this film involve him mostly sitting down in like a chair or sitting in bed, and that's why there's rarely any scenes of him walking around. Um, but yeah. Um, Probably honestly one of my other favorite scenes in the film, just to mention up right now, is basically this final scene when after the maid does not like Frankenstein, or like not Frankenstein, but the monster, he just pulls the self-destruct lever and just blows the whole laboratory up. It's incredible. Um, it's like one of the most action-packed scenes that you'll get from like a 1930s movie about a monster, and it's like the only I love that scene, but the only problem that I have is that why the hell did Frankenstein install a big ass lever? Like you can see it right there. I'm gonna try and hold it steady, but you can see that the monster is holding onto a big ass lever that he pulls down, and all of a sudden the castle explodes. Like I get that you like if you want to destroy the evidence, you want to destroy the castle. Like I get that, but why make it a big ass lever that like someone could easily just knock over, or like just hit it and then boom, everything blows up. It's just ugh. it's it's that's the only problem that I have with that final scene. But besides that, it's incredible. Um, And then the score is done by Franz Waxman. What a weird sounding name. Unfortunately, what's his face? I don't think it says it back here. Well, let me look it back. Fortunately, Bernard Karn did not return for the Bride of Frankenstein for the score, so they obviously hired Franz. Um, and I think the score is fine for this film. It sounds in the same universe as Frankenstein to make it more linked. Uh, oh, I almost just dropped it. To link it between the first film. Um, it still sounds mostly the same. Um, which I enjoyed. Like, I rather have a score that sounds similar than a score that sounds completely different. Um, even though I love the scores, for an example, um, even though all of these films are different, I love the score to Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Um, and yet Star Trek 2 and 3 had different scores, or had different scores from the first film, even though both of them together sound almost like the theme, like they sound the same. Um, Even though Jerry Goldsmith did return for Star Trek 5 and brought his themes over to there, I just really wish that all of these films had a consistent theme. Um, but if you want to learn more about that, then go and check out my reviews of the Star Trek films that I did earlier this year. Um, but with these two, I think it sounds perfectly fine. That they both sound pretty similar. Um, and so yeah. So even though I did say that I think this film is slightly better than the first film, I'm gonna give this film the same ranking that I did the first film, and that is a 7 out of 10. I did say that it is slightly better, and it is, but I don't think it's it's good enough to deserve an 8 out of 10. So I'm gonna keep it the same rank at a 7 out of 10. But I do recommend both of these films to watch. If you like both of these, then I recommend getting like the Frankenstein box set to see all the rest of the Frankenstein movies, and then maybe if you like them, you can go into like Dracula and the Wolfman. Um, all the rest of the classic Universal monsters. Um, but yeah. Um, all right, guys. So this is gonna be the end for my duo reviews for Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein for this week. Stay tuned for next Saturday when I'm gonna be talking about a certain John Carpenter flick that was a bomb on release, but over time it comes to be well known as one of the best horror films ever made. Yes, next week on Saturday I'm gonna be talking about John Carpenter's The Thing, released in 1982. And I'm really excited for this one because I personally haven't seen The Thing yet. I will be touching base on The Thing from Another World from 1951 along with the 2011 prequel, but I'll be mostly talking about the 1982 classic film by John Carpenter. So anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoyed these two reviews. I posted a little bit later than I wanted them to be, but at least they did come out, and I didn't miss a whole week. And stay tuned to next Saturday where I'm going to be talking about John Carpenter's The Thing. Live long and prosper. Out.